Welcome to Biztech's C-Suite Conversations Show, the show where we feature companies operating across the Asia Pacific, talking about their solutions and how they make a difference to their customers' businesses. Today, we speak to Eve Rosti, CEO of Synpulse Group, and Solomon Wettstein, partner and managing director of Synpulse. Now, Synpulse is an internationally established management consulting company and valued partner of many of the world's largest financial services providers. Now, welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having us.
Now, could you start, Eve, by giving us a brief history of Synpulse and what you do?
So Synpulse has been in operation for 25 plus years. And we are a boutique financial service consultancy company. We cover exclusively banking and insurance as a transformation agent in the region. We have a global presence across multiple markets. We are in 9 countries in APAC, and globally we're roughly 800 consultants.
Okay, so you focus on banking and insurance companies. What are your key service offerings to these segments?
So it's broad, obviously. We're a partner to our clients, but mainly it has to do with their operating models. So we help them to implement their strategies, their corporate strategies, when it comes to transforming them. One way is, of course, to look at what's behind the first horizon, what's the next horizon, and then really sort of implement their hypothesis about the future, and sometimes also shaping that hypothesis.
Okay, and so one of the key things is you also have technology products that enable this, that complement your consulting services. Solomon, could you tell us about your new product, Synpulse 8, and the vision behind it?
Absolutely. I mean, as you can see, this suits versus shorts that we sometimes resemble. Eve in a suit as the classical consultant, me now as an engineer with the Synpulse 8 shirt. I think if you take up the name as well, we have gone a bit further as we've done in the past 20-25 years, not just feeling the pulse, but also actually pulsating, so that 8 is actually not just coming from somewhere, as it's of course a lucky number, but it's actually coming really from exaggerating that pulse a bit further. And what it actually means, it's a rhythm, it's agility, which goes into the development principles, as all the engineers out there would know very well. So our product per se is, we call it the Pulse 8 app, is kind of an orchestrator between what financial services companies, the big banks, insurance companies have as their own application landscape, and then also all the thousands of fintech third-party applications. We bring it all together. We have the orchestrator, kind of the display or the application, and with a vision of in the next years to come that you could actually use our app, completely launch a wealth manager, for example, a private bank from scratch, and have all the products, all the features, all the functionalities right on the go, fully enabled on a cloud platform. Now, we of course understand that every bank, every insurer, they differentiate themselves with a bit of a different setup, different products, different services. So I said, this orchestrator, of course, is then bespoke in a sense that you can, for every customer, change it in the right way. And that's where also consultants come into play, work with the designers and engineers to make sure that it really fits the environment you're in.
And how do you give us some examples of clients that you've worked with and that have used Synpulse 8?
Yeah, let me start, and I'm sure Eve has also a few interesting stories to tell after. So we've worked basically with 80% of the biggest, largest banks and insurance companies. Many of them, of course, the big names that you would know. The biggest banks, of course, they, over the past 50 years, built up their big IT departments and have done a lot of work themselves bespoke, where we basically help them to innovate There is also smaller players, even like a family office or small institutions, fund managers that do not have a big, large, expensive IT department, and they rather want to take a solution, we call it off the shelf or out of the box, where they could also just come to us, and together with our third-party vendor relationship network, we will deliver the solution to them. So one example I want to bring here is the virtual banking initiatives you probably heard across APAC. There's many new virtual banks being launched, and we've worked with some of them, and Eve can probably add on later on the Southeast Asian side, where we help them to basically launch really from a greenfield approach, a whole core banking system where we work with some of the state-of-the-art solutions vendors out there, but then also the whole experience layers, the application, as well as the let's say, advisor dashboards and so on. So these virtual banks are quite interesting because they don't come from a big legacy of having this old AS400 mainframe system. They are able to actually really, like a Facebook launch, come with mobile first and with the latest cloud native applications. And that's, of course, where it's a bit easier, where you don't have all the complex integrations. But we, of course, do also the traditional big, heavy lifting of core banking system transformation with some of the banks that go from these old legacy platforms to a bit of a more modern architecture.
Could you give us some examples of these sort of virtual banks that you've helped to launch?
I think if you probably are closest to the latest one, you can add on here.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So it's a innovation frenzy that's happening currently in the market, and this is fueled by of course the launch of the banking licenses in many jurisdictions, and there are many more to come. I think India just announced now, next to Singapore, Hong Kong, and Malaysia, and Philippines, and so on. So there's a lot of growth momentum. And there's a lot of new players entering into that space. And so this is really an interesting area to support digital natives, right? The ones that are starting afresh, greenfield, as well as incumbents, right? With sort of a bit more old structures to go into that new world and help them to actually renovate and win speed and catch up to those virtual banks. As to the products and services of these virtual banks, they start very somber, I must say. So you get maybe a credit card and this, an account, and then maybe a wallet, and that's the starting base. But of course, the music plays when you can scale this model. Let's say you start in Hong Kong or in Singapore, and you scale towards Indonesia, right, where you have almost 300 million potential customers, right? And they are not yet financially included in some ways. So the growth momentum that we will see going forward the next 5 years is going to be phenomenal. That's why innovation frenzy is happening right now, and many banks are scratching their heads how they can get on, in the forefront of this.
And Eve, let me zoom in, because you've celebrating your 25th anniversary, and you have a footprint in Asia Pacific for a number of years. Could you share some examples of banks and insurance companies in the region that you've recently helped to either innovate, cut costs, or grow their revenues substantially as a result of your consulting services or some of your product offerings?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, we started with the private banks in the region because that's a bit our heritage, Swiss private banking, where we basically innovated their models. Here, around 2008, that was the area where there was expansive growth and establishment of foreign players that wanted to address the market potential. In the meantime, the local players have caught up. So we've actually fully diversified our business model towards the local clients, talking about the tier ones. I think, as Salomon said, 80% of the local banks, we are basically working day in and day out in their innovation. And as of late, we are working with the greenfield banks, the ones that are in the media. So yeah, happy to report that.
Now, Solomon, I want to now tap on both yours and Eve's helicopter view of the industry. And I'm going to start with you, Solomon. What do you see as some of the key technology trends within the financial services sector right now?
Yeah, I mean, let me take a step back and zoom out of where I see the financial services industry in, let's say, 5 to 10 years from now. I mean, we are all used to going to a bank branch to open a bank account, going through papers. And I still remember when I came to Hong Kong, I went to the biggest bank and they took an iPad and I said, oh, good, digital onboarding. But she actually took a picture with the iPad of my documents that I signed. Nothing digital, right? Whereby I just opened a corporate bank account in China where the actual process was through WeChat. So first of all, and that's why I'm really big fan of the virtual banking initiative, it should be all fully digital as a fact. And what it means, it all should be mobile first. So in 5-10 years from now, if we take our mobile phone, we actually do not even, and that's basically what I call the concept of open wealth management, open finance, is that you do not even realize that you're actually banking. So you walk into a shop, you see a TV, you want to buy it, you don't have the cash. Your mobile phone already recognizes that you're standing in front of the TV. There is a beacon in the store. You actually want that TV. It already recognizes, hey, actually, you can buy now, pay later with the right finance structure. So do you want it? Say yes, that's basically the rate you're agreeing to buy it and pay later. You're not even using a banking app because actually the apps, they're all embedded into your social media application and so on. You then go out and you see a poster of a nice beach somewhere in Indonesia and you see, hey, that's where I would love to go, right? And with that, recognizing that you look at that poster, it would already say, hey, actually, do you want to book a trip to Indonesia? And how do you finance it once again? And if you're anyway interested in the Indonesian market, do you also want to invest into an Indonesia bond? Or do you actually want to buy shares in some of the latest fintech startups in Indonesia? So it's all fully embedded that we do not even realize they're actually working with financial service industry players, that we're actually working and engaging with a bank, with a product company, with a fund management company. And I think this is where virtual banking is not yet as I would see it in 5 to 10 years from now, because they all build their own apps again, rather than embed it completely into whatever is already out there. For example, in China, it's already embedded into WeChat. So it's many applications, many programs embedded into WeChat. So it could be embedded into Google, into Facebook, into any social media. And maybe one action you take in a financing of a car is then coming through an HSBC. Maybe you buy it in an equity that actually goes through interactive brokers in terms of then the actual servicing, and it's in a Standard Chartered custody account. So the banks are still there, the traditional ones, the new ones, the virtual ones, but it's all virtual in a sense that you do not realize that you actually bank. So that's the future, how I would see it.
Now, Eve, can you give me then, through your management consultant's lens, really some key trends and growth that you are seeing in the financial services sector?
Yeah, so invisible banking, as Solomon said, I think sums it all, right? With creating that upstream experience, which is no longer banking, right? It's a lifestyle, it's educational, it's job related. I think that's key. And there's so many applications that we cannot even think of right now, but they will come, right? Alongside with that, there's also an infrastructure topic. So this movement to cloud, the global cloud market is $707 billion and growing at 20% per year. So that's a very interesting movement. In fact, many e-commerce have done that already, right? They're already properly cloudified. However, for the FSI. This is not yet done, and the regulatory hurdles are still there, but they're breaking fast, right? And we observe in our daily dealings with the boards and the CIOs that actually the offload of workload into cloud has highest priority, because the innovation speed there is much faster, and it's actually, it scales better if properly designed.
And where do you see opportunities for newcomers to come in? Because the fintech market is hot. I mean, you try to hire somebody in Singapore right now, you just can't find people because there's so many players looking for talent. Talent is a big issue. But where do you see opportunities for example, newcomers to come in, and where are the niches that perhaps the incumbents have not properly captured?
May I start on that, if you don't mind? I mean, one element, of course, big trend is around data. Of course, everyone brings that topic up, and there are some companies that are do extremely well in capture data and really learn from it and make appropriate recommendations. So obviously, again, big brands like Tencent, Alibaba, WeChat, Facebook, name it all, where you just due to how you scroll, how you react on pictures, or also it could bring Netflix, of how you actually react on the different outlets of the movies, that you get the right recommendation. That's the so-called maybe Netflix banking of that these companies know very well how to actually present something to you and make recommendations to you. And even though the banks work with you maybe over 10, 20 years, they have not probably captured enough data yet and come up and call you for a loan, even though you don't need it. This is where I see, of course, the biggest gap of where some of these tech companies can immediately capture big market with using the data more meaningful and making the right recommendation of, for example, what is the next product you want to buy, which markets do you want to invest, based, of course, also on the risk appetite, compliance procedures, and so on.
So Solomon, then in your view, and I actually share your view, essentially the super apps and the social media boys have probably a key advantage over the incumbent banks in basically reaching out to younger and newer customers.
Absolutely, but that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing also for the incumbent or traditional banks if they see that as a valuable partnership. Because we've just seen Apple, for example, gave up on just the simple payments. There's a lot of things they probably do not even want to go in because actually they make a lot of business somewhere else. So just going into cards, payment, some of the basic banking transactions that might not be even that interesting for these big tech companies, but the valuable data, of course, could be used to really bring the right services to the customers. So if they collaborate with also incumbent banks, product providers, this ecosystem, and that's what we also strongly believe in. We believe in this whole financial services will split up even further into a big ecosystem of many, many different players. And the actual service or the product towards the client is then a combination of maybe, yes, these tech players that are very strong and that can bring the right data analytics to actually make sure you get the right service offered, but may still then tap on traditional banks, traditional stock markets in terms of the actual product, the handling, the cash management, and some of those aspects.
Eve, what's your view on this? Particularly, I'd like to find out your view of how companies like AirAsia, for example, are pivoting from their traditional business and really becoming the super app and hoping to be the next financial services giant.
Yeah, the winner takes it all, especially the one that owns the client journey, isn't it? Or at least one thinks so. But I would add to what Solomon said as well. It's all a matter of where you play. So a tier one bank that has utility in every country, it's still a highly regulated business. I mean, they can offer banking as a service, as many of them have started to do. So that's the whole open banking principle. So banking as a service, I think is a key trend that will go way beyond where we see it right now. That's also one area we are heavily investing into with digital assets that actually support this as an acceleration towards that, right? I believe this is key in order to enable those super apps, then actually also, again, innovation speed, ecosystem partner play, to actually bring those services quickly to the clients. Talk wallet as a service, for example.
Gentlemen, it's been a fascinating conversation, but before we leave, could each of you share your final thoughts with us? We can start with you, Yves.
Yeah, sure. It's exciting times, even for us right now, of course, because there's so much movement in the market. We've seen the digital budgets are increasing and key priorities for all players. And that obviously triggers investments, and that triggers also consultancy needs. That triggers also architecture and innovation that we would like to bring to the table. And a successful client makes us successful. So I think that's the equation that we will observe. Thank you, Brian.
Solomon, yourself?
Absolutely. So I may want to end the conversation with making a slight note towards the talents out there. I mean, what I see is the most difficult part of our business currently is always finding the right talents. And you can read many times that actually the future banker is an engineer. So with all the technology trends that we discussed just now, especially engineers, designers, scientists, they're very rare here in the market with all the growth that is going on. So I see the next 5+ years really as important to create an environment where the top talents feel comfortable and feel also fully utilized, where they can explore, where they can innovate, where they find all the latest state-of-the-art tools and solutions to really embrace this change that we are pushing for. And if you manage to do that, I mean, not only us, Synpulse 8, but also our clients and our partners, then of course the future definitely will be bright.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
Thanks, Brian.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and I've been speaking to Yves Rosti, CEO of Synpulse Group, and Solomon Whitestein, Partner and Managing Director, on Biztech's C-Suite Show. This video and podcast will be on our various social media platforms, as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please like and subscribe our various platforms. Thanks for tuning in.